The first part of the process, which I had to do, was to design the board which I wanted to create. We designed this board on CAD Design, where Ben Skinner helped us work out the dimensions on which we wanted our board to be. Within this design section, we needed to make sure there was enough volume depending on what our surfing ability was like. After designing our boards on CAD Design, we then picked the most suitable blank. These blanks were from Homeblown. Homeblown are created using a TFI foam. This foam was designed by themselves and is their own special recipe. Another sort of foam which we could have used was TDI. The difference with these two foams are that TDI is a lot softer in the inside and has a harder outside. As you can see in the video, the blanks were cut in a big machine. The machine left slight indents and bumps on the blanks, which we then needed to sand and shape properly later on. After our boards were cut out, we needed to take them back to Ben Skinner's factory, where we'd have different types of sandpaper and blocks to get them to the correct shape. Within this process, it was the most important one on getting it the correct shape that we were looking for, with the right size rails, tail and nose. While you're shaping your board, it is very important to make sure you have the correct light in the shaping room. This is so you can see the correct shadows on the board. Lights are put on either side of the room, making sure that they're at the same height as the board will be sitting at. Throughout this process, we used various types of sandpapers and different types of blocks. This was to make sure that we got the correct smoothness on the board and didn't take away too much foam when we didn't want to. We started this process with the more coarse sandpaper and blocks to define the shape of the board and to get rid of those little bumps which were created when the board got cut at the very beginning. After that, we then moved down to finer sandpaper and making sure that we used finer sandpaper on the rails so we didn't flatten them off too much. After we finished the sanding process for now, we chose our correct templates on what we wanted for the nose and tail. This was completely up to us and depended on what we would want for our board and how we would want to surf it. We then moved on to doing a spray lacquer. This is done to protect the board from UV, so the sun, and to help stabilise it and to protect it. The next stage in this process was to apply fiberglass cloth to the top of the board. For this, as you can see in the video, it's just a bit of cloth put over the top, cut around it slightly, and then you use a catalyst and a resin mixed together and you pour it over the top to help it set. With this resin mix, we put the catalyst in it as this makes the resin set and go harder quicker. Also, you've got to be careful that you don't put too much catalyst in, otherwise it will set straight away even before you've managed to spread it out correctly. Once you've put the top layer on, or the first top coat, sorry, you need to make sure it sets properly. This, as you can see by the video, you then need to sand it off just to make sure it's nice and smooth so you don't have any uneven bumps on the bottom. So once you do the top, you then do the bottom one and then do another top coat so there's extra protection on the top. You want to make sure it sets correctly before you put on the next layer. After all the resin fiberglass layers are put on and set correctly, you then need to make sure you do a hot coat. This just adds extra protection to the board and helps the resin set even better. Once that's all done, we then made sure that we lined up our centre fin blocks properly. We used a jigsaw to cut out the centre fin box to make sure that it was correctly sized. As you can see in the video, this was done for me. We also used a drill with a special head on it to cut out the side fin plugs as well. With the centre fin, we placed another bit of fiberglass cloth inside and placed their box for the fin inside it. All of these fin plugs were set with resin again to make sure that it's set properly. As you can see, the board is coming on quite nicely now and it's nearly done, but there's only got a few more processes left. The next process was to sand down the centre fin box and the side fins as well to make sure that it was nice and flush with the rest of the board. To do this, it was quite simple and just to sand straight over the top of the plastic, and it took it down nicely. Before any of the exciting artwork went on, we needed to make sure that we sanded the whole board to make sure it was super soft, nice and smooth, and there's no lumps and bumps on it. With this one, you've got to be ultra careful that you don't take any of the edges off or on the rails, as it would then affect the shape massively. Now there are only 1 or 2 stages left, and this is all about the artwork now. So as you can see, Verdi here is helping me with the artwork to put it on, and this is just do stage by stage. So to start with, he drew on to the board with a bit of pen with what design I wanted. As you can see, it's the water droplets coming down and forming the wave at the bottom of the board. After we then put masking tape over the top, cut out the correct sizes with a little knife, very gently there as we didn't want to damage the board. And then stage by stage, Verdi then spray painted with different colour paints. As you can see by my board that's standing next to me now, or standing in the classroom now, the artwork is slightly different to what is showing in the video. The work was all great, but I feel it wasn't quite what I was expecting. So luckily, the next morning we managed to sand it all off, and Verdi did the new artwork for me very quickly. Within all these processes, there is a bit of health and safety. Obviously the catalyst and the resins and all the other materials that we used have to be kept within a safe place. For example, the resin and catalyst are kept in separate containers, metal containers, and should be stored in an enclosed corner of the room. All substances that we used were flammable, but luckily we didn't have any issues with that. In every room of the factory there's an extractor fan. This makes sure that all fumes and dust, especially from the sanding room, are taken out safely without damaging any of the visitors or the workers working there. There are 2 main substances which I had to be careful of that didn't mix, or that Ben is always careful of that are never mixed, and that's the polyester resin and the UPS foam. If these 2 get mixed together, then they'll catch on fire straight away, so we've got to make sure they're kept separate at all times and not accidentally put in the same place. All staff that work there are obviously used to working with their own tools, but they were obviously trained at the beginning to make sure they could use them safely without damaging it or making a mistake on the boards. Chemicals which have been used and aren't needed anymore get stored into a big metal drum, and then Seabase come and collect them. Now the final bit about why I designed the board that I've got now. It's the first ever hard board, so I wanted something that was still buoyant enough for me to surf, but I could also progress on to later on when I do actually improve a bit more. This is why I got the 2 side fins and the centre fin, because it means that later on when I do improve I can always take the side fins out and just surf with the centre fin. So as you can see, my surfboard which I've designed is 6'6", so it's kind of mini Mao Gypsy fun board sort of style, with a flat tail. At all times in all rooms you must always wear a mask. This is to protect yourself from making yourself ill or anything like that.